Sarah Driver, welcome to the LYHL Podcast. It's such an honor and privilege to have you here. You are my first family member on the podcast, and I'm so pleased that it's you. And we're cousins, first cousins on my mom's side. And I just, as far back like any working memory that I have of you, I just feel this closeness to you and this attachment to you, which doesn't happen just automatically in family relationships, which is kind of the narrative that we have. But I consider you a friend, and I'm so glad for all the offline conversations we have. But I'm so just I'm nervous actually. Like it means so much to me that I'm a bit nervous today and excited. And there's like a tenderness. I told you about that before we started. There's like so to people listening or watching. If you're watching, you might see like me kind of tear up at various points. I think I'm even kind of there. There's like the waterworks are ready, but I'm so happy that you're here.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Elle. I'm really grateful. I love you so much, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. I'm so glad we get to have this conversation because these conversations are they're not my only favorite, but I created this podcast, so I'm doing it about what I like it to be out. And these are like I just love having these deep conversations. Um, and I know that I have so much to learn from you, and I know anybody listening is going to benefit as well. Um, and that's a big part of this just podcast is for me. Like I love these conversations and I benefit from them. So there's like this, you could describe it as a selfishness to that or a self-interest in that it benefits me. And I just can't wait to hear your answers to these and just find out where we go, and where the questions take us, where your answers take us, and where our dialogue goes. So, first question, how would you describe your work and vocation?
I love this question. It helped me kind of pull out a through line that is in all of the work that I do. So I would say vocationally, vocation is often multifaceted. And so for me, at this stage of my life, I have a vocation as a mother, and I have three boys who are 9, 7, and 4 now. We had our
You had some
recent,
birthdays. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
I was like, wait, that's not what. Oh, yeah, they get older.
Always March birthdays.
Wow.
And so vocationally, there's so much depth to that calling, I feel. Um, Predating my mothering days, there's a call in my life toward the work of justice,
Mm,
and that has played out for me in like the how-tos of justice. And so I have kind of two tracks that I work along. One is as a consultant for equity in the workplace, and that is all the how-tos of equity in the workplace. Like there's so many organizations saying, we know that we should be equitable, we want to be equitable, but we don't know like practically what to do. And so that's where I come in.
hmm.
And
Love
then
it.
on the other track of that justice calling is working in faith spaces
Mm.
to talk about what, how, in practical ways to live out our call to do the work of justice.
Mm.
And so that's um, kind of two buckets there. One is how do we do justice? How do we envision justice? What is a positive vision of justice? And then how do we confront and undo injustice? So both of those pockets are in there.
Hmm. Are you separating that with like overlaying the faith in the workplace, or you see that in uh, both of those settings?
That's a good question. I was thinking of it more as the faith space. Like when I do
I
the
see it. Yeah.
equation for faith and as I'm writing,
Uh-huh.
like I've just finished this week a sermon series and a Bible study on that. How do we undo justice? And then I have another sermon series and Bible study about how do we envision and embody like the good side of justice,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with the idea that justice is not just the absence of wrongdoing, but there's a proactive work that we're doing to make sure that people are
Mm-hmm.
being treated
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah, it seems to me if I'm just going to jump in if I may on that, like follow that last thread and we can come back and see where we go with the rest of things. The thing that's occurring to me is how um like just how people navigate the world, right? So this is we're going to deep places very quickly, of course, here. Like the and this is I think almost the flip side of what you're saying, but it's, truths are usually we say like two sides of a coin, right? They're uh
Mhm.
so it's not just like the absence. You said like it's not just the if I this is my recollection. You said it's not just the absence of wrongdoing, but like how do I proactively do things? I think I hear a lot of people, and then even just as I think about like, well, how do I navigate the world and the evolution of my life and my faith journey? Something that comes up is, well, it's kind of like how much can we control, right?
Mm,
Like, and we deal a lot with that in the our tech world where we are hit with a lot of news, we're hit with a lot of images of crises everywhere, and it can be overwhelming. So I'm already drifting off a little bit without saying even kind of I think some of the places where we can operate sometimes is, well, I'm just going to take care of myself. I'm going to take care of the people around me. And there seems to be such a need for wisdom there because I actually do when I take on every like evil, if I can put this the big label, which for me has become very confronted in a way that I've never been confronted in the last year and a half, I would say, like my just awareness of that and just like really like, wow, there's a lot of people doing things that I'm like, well, the best word I would say is kind of evil. And maybe it's masquerading as different things, but they were really not choosing other people's well-being and we're making these decisions, or we're actively not caring about other people as we do this. So in coming back to what I'm saying, I think sometimes I think there's like a good that can help us. I think that's even biblical, right? Like when I was walking the dogs today, I just thought about like don't worry about tomorrow. Each day has
mhm,
enough trouble of its own, kind of Sermon on the Mount, like these um, kind of, it is kind of like a prompt to like stay here, be here now. And I also see the word I'm just going to use is excuse. And I think we could, I think there's kind of an excuse of like, well, I don't, to not um, seek to undo justice
mm.
in the world, or maybe we bypass justice that's close to us and go far. There's all kinds of layers, right, of how people don't interact in justice. And just like, well, I'm a good person. So I don't have a direct question there. I can make one. Is there enough there to like, how do you, I guess my question would be is like, with those kind of thoughts, like what insight do you have, or what's your experience or approach, or where are you at with that?
Yeah. I love what you said about the wisdom that's required
Hmm.
as we navigate these issues. And I heard a podcast this week that said wisdom is something like the knowing what is worthy of your attention.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I had never heard that before, but it was really struck me. And I thought, okay, how much like attention am I giving to things that are not worthy? What
Hmm.
things are worthy are not getting my attention? Um, and I think that is such a big piece of it. So we have the
Hmm.
layer of discernment around being able to identify when things are right or wrong. And so sometimes they can be so confusing when you're in the moment. You know, maybe
Hmm.
stepping back, you would be able to realize a little bit more easily,
Hmm.
like, oh, actually, that was really wrong what was happening. But in the moment, it's like you're either freezing or kind of like, you
Hmm.
know, flight, fight, all of those things happening in us internally. And so there's a discernment around what I call developing your injustice radar.
Injustice radar. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so, like, okay, when I have these categories to evaluate, like, what is good and right, so systems are set up for this purpose, and they should be assuring that resources and services and information are being distributed evenly as needed. Knowing what things are supposed to be, and then learning practically what are the common like the diversions that we're going to see off of that. Okay, they're going to be things like institutional neglect. Like there's certain people who don't have access to this information. So that flags for us immediately, oh, there's a group of people who don't have access to information that they need to navigate the system. That means it's unjust. And when we have that in our minds developed already, that injustice radar, and it can just become more sensitive
Hmm.
um, and well honed,
Hmm.
then we can identify in the moment immediately rather than wishing we had realized what was happening and looking back and wishing we
Hmm.
had taken action.
Hmm.
And then it's the same thing with what do we do once we realize what is going on? Okay, so there's an injustice. What do I do? And
Hmm.
so if we can talk through the steps by step, here's what you do,
Hmm.
develop a roadmap and kind of a mental model of here's what happens to confront injustice effectively. First, we investigate. We
Investigate.
understand what type of what's actually happening in the situation. Gather as much information as we can. It can be a situation of just asking a quick question. It could be a really in-depth kind of research project of identifying different sources of data. You know, it can run the gamut, but that investigation piece and then discerning from there, is this a situation where I can intervene directly? Or is this a situation where I need to make the case to someone else to intervene?
Hmm. Like an
And so,
advocacy kind of.
exactly.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
being able to identify right off the bat, okay, this is an intervention piece because it's close to home, it's in my own family. I've identified this injustice is happening in my family, my workplace, my church, my classroom. And so I can intervene directly. Now, researching what effective interventions are, that's all part of the investigation piece. But what understanding, okay, I want to, as you said, start closest to home, take out the log in my own eye,
Hmm.
and then be able to use the lessons I'm learning close to home to be able to then kind of work outward from there. And that's something that I see a lot is that people are pointing to the injustice out there
Hmm.
rather than looking at the injustice
Hmm.
own context because that's hard. It's hard
Hmm.
to identify it when you're used to it. It's the water that you're
Hmm.
swimming in.
Hmm.
And it's hard to speak
Hmm.
up because you have
Hmm.
more to lose. You have more relationships that you're invested in.
Hmm.
It's so scary, can be, you know, depending on the situation. And so sometimes it's easier to like those injustices in that country or in that
Correct. Yeah.
area or in
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
sector and neglect the injustices that we have the most influence on, which is in our, you know, our own circles and contexts. So I think that's another area of discernment and courage.
Um, that um so both coming from a Christian background and faith, I think we can speak to, I've for sure seen it. I won't speak for you. I'll allow you to say yay or nay. But from my perspective, it's, almost like endemic within Christianity that there is this kind of, and people use terms like, like a saviorism of not being involved maybe in local politics or local nonprofits, but and I look back at how I operated, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect or but maybe this radar, there's this awareness and that a call that which then rises up in me to, okay, what can I do? Because it is actually more disruptive of my daily life, my weekly life to, okay, am I gonna volunteer here, or am I gonna, like, what resources do I have to give locally versus, well, I'm going to go on my spring break in college, to these people in need over there, flying over or taking a bus, it wasn't, it was, it was really budget. So I wasn't flying at the time, but these long drives to various places or like inner cities uh, and then I've even done that internationally, right? And then it is flying, like, and I'm raising funds and I am discerning right now, right? Even as okay, younger generations come up for me, and now I'm in the position where people are asking me more like for that money. And is this like how do I navigate? Well, this is how the system works within the evangelical Christian background that I was brought up in, is that there is like caring for justice on some level. However, right, do we need to go to this other country? Like, yeah, I don't know. So what is my thought or question? Like, is that, to me, that seems like a problem. So this point of, and I love that we have the most influence in our own circles, and as a prompt to like an evaluation kind of prompt.
Yeah. 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 There's so on the international piece, there is, I think, a value in getting outside of your context and being able to
Agree.
kind of learn about the dynamics in this other space. And then you can kind of come back and see them more clearly in your own space.
Mm-hmm.
So an example for me would be when I did my study abroad program in Guatemala
Mm-hmm.
and place we both love.
Yeah.
I was learning about Indigenous rights. I was staying in the homes of Indigenous families, learning about marginalization of Indigenous communities. And so when I came back to the US, having learned about it in kind of where I didn't have a stake in it or I didn't have a socialization around it, I could come back to my own context and see, oh, wait, Indigenous people, we have some of those in our country, and we have a lot of like all the same issue. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like
Right.
I had a
Mm-hmm.
clarity that came from being an outsider looking in, learning about the dynamic
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
before. And I don't know if I could have done it in the same way
Mm-hmm.
being taught. Maybe I could have. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. There is something I think about being an outsider and learning about it outside of your own
Mm-hmm.
context where things are a little more charged. That I think
I
can be
yeah.
valuable too, but
Yes,
you know,
I agree, and I think the settings that we're talking about are different. Like, you didn't go down with a church group and
true.
stay with a church group and leading Bible studies for them and like these kind of things. You were um, embedded, sometimes I think has a negative connotation, but so I don't want to say it if it means that. But you were like embedded
Yeah.
with their community and really learn, like you were there as literally as a student,
Yes.
which I think is a different
Yeah.
framework.
Yes. And orientation around. Yes. Yeah. That's a good point because one, A few years ago, I heard someone talk about like if we're going to keep doing mission trips, as we call them,
Hmm.
we need to start approaching them as family reunions.
Oh, tell me more. I'm imagining and I want to.
I just thought it was the most lovely thing because I thought, okay, if we want to keep getting young people out of their kind of routine and have these experiences, but we don't want them to be kind of with a patronizing mindset or things that would reinforce stereotypes that they're going with or even create new ones. What can we do? And so this
Hmm.
model of just like, come sit with us, be with us, learn about our life here, tell us about your life there, like not that we're going in with the saviorism, as you said, but just as
Hmm.
humans gathering around a table, getting to know each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's my body wants to kind of go into some like goosebumps there of like this idea of this need for um and this isn't Christian phraseology, but it's like just different words for the same thing, like a collective consciousness, like that we are all human, that we all like we share these common origins, like who or what is sustaining us, like how are we alive, like the miracle of it, and that we just there's things around us like the air we breathe, the water we swim in. We're talking about these cultures that make people othered. Like othering is like a very big um, point of reflection for me, and just ruminating on that. And so in terms of a radar, like I just see that all over the place. And I'm just like, well, how do we not do that? How do I not do that in terms of how I operate and navigate the world? So I love the family reunion because I think some things that you're highlighting are humility and curiosity seem to me to be really key, and discerning, like that there's a kind of a patience. Those are maybe three things that I picked up in what you were describing.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine in grad school who had spent, she's from the north of Mexico, but she had spent time in the south of Mexico with um, a community, and the policy of her organization was if you're going into this community, it is 6 months before you can speak. Basically, like you are
Yeah.
there to observe, you are there to listen, you are there to learn, and once you have um, you don't go in thinking, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Understand why things are happening, how things are happening, how they fit together. And what a delight to, as someone who is like a firstborn, you can feel a lot of pressure to have the answers.
I don't know about that. Yeah, I mean, I have my own reasons for needing to have the answers, but I'm not
Not
firstborn.
only firstborn,
Yeah, yeah, that's
yes.
right. I have a strong need to be right somehow. Yeah.
Yes, and the freedom that comes as I more and more kind of like take the pressure off, feel like I I don't know the answer and that's okay. And there's like a breathing
Yeah, yeah, we
happen.
need that a lot.
Yeah, just take the pressure off, listen, learn, ask questions, and what a gift of freedom that is for all of us. And that's one of the things, I think in faith spaces, and this can be true, but we have faith language around it. Sometimes there is a um, tension built around like grace and accountability, for example. And like, let's not hold Sarah accountable for what she did because we want to give her grace. And what we find is that that is not doing me any favors to not be held accountable. And so, when we talk about that freedom that we can have from not feeling like we need to be saviors, the concept here on a bigger picture for me is that justice is good for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Accountability is
Hmm.
good for me as a perpetrator of injustice because it lets me know there's a better and different way out there. And it invites me into that. Accountability is good for the victim because it validates what happened to me was really wrong and it's worth my community is coming around and saying this was not okay. And then, of course, accountability is really important for the whole community. And so seeing that, there's the psalm that talks about love and truth. Um, Kiss, I think, is I'm messing this up, but the idea that Jesus is grace and truth embodied, and there's not a separation there. Um, we have the gift of accountability, we have the gift of mercy, and how do we work those without putting them in tension?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
In
and
in
even, hmm
with the umbrella that this is good,
hmm
justice is good for
hmm
the oppressor and the oppressed.
hmm hmm yeah, I mean, that's a lot of even like repentance, right? This idea of, and people can, uh, it can be taught different ways. I think ways that are like healthier versus unhealthy, but like a healthy repentance is, right? This just acknowledging this wrongdoing and something that science is absolutely showing is just how integrated we are, right? And so if we're
Mm,
harming somebody, like just, well, I'll back it up. So even the presence, just even like observing something, they say, physicists say that just to observe a particle changes a particle. And so, yeah. So,
really?
yes, so there is just scientifically, and this is just particles, and then obviously we have many, many, many particles in our body. So just, we know that when somebody enters a room, it changes, right? That there's always an exchange of is somebody really happy? Is they really sad? Or there's awareness. Your behavior changes because now somebody is there. My dogs even like I'm like, how do my dogs know that he was sleeping, but I like got up and he's like, no, he's got to be there's this exchange and and I've spent decades helping people feel healthy in their body and move well and dealing with a lot of pain. And really I'm learning it's so obvious like as the years go on and the reps with patients and just how integrated we are that emotional stress manifesting physically. And so if you're doing something to harm somebody, like something that's not good for you. Like we all even whatever our standard or behavior, we've all been like generous at some point. We've all been like kind, and we know what that feels like, that there is like a reciprocity, there is a energy exchange, and that we get to decide how that is. And so, yeah, like biblically, like a repentance is just kind of like ooh, this is not creating like the future and the interaction I want, like with other people, and with God. And can I change that? Um, this always happens in these conversations. We can go forever, and I am more like long leash kind of person. So, I do. Before we go on, I do want to hear a little bit about. I love the use of calling as you talked about this. Like, how did you come to justice as a calling? And then a bit of like, what was your journey to equip you like in this work to feel
Mm.
like to know how to investigate and discern and to, yeah, will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I was in a Sunday school class when I was 17.
Mhm.
The deep irony is that it was a Sunday school class a Sunday school curriculum, excuse me, written by Ravi Zacharias,
Uh-huh.
who we know now, and I know now from what has been discovered, had some significant deficiencies in justice in his own
Okay, maybe
life.
I don't know this. I think I knew him probably in the influential part. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
there was
And
some bad stuff that
okay.
came
Yes.
out.
Well, yeah, we can leave it at that. But
Yes.
it's kind of like,
Um,
oh, of course there was, is a little bit what's
yeah.
playing in my head, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So However,
However, at that time, yeah.
yes, there was a part of the curriculum that was reading Isaiah 58,
Mm,
which is saying, echoes lots of different passages in the prophets and messages from the prophets and from God through the prophets. Um, you're singing and praying, and I could care less because at the
yeah.
same time, you are treating people unjustly, your employees are not being treated well. Here is the fast that I require from you,
Hmm.
the fast of basically doing justice, and it goes into all
Hmm.
these different
Hmm.
elements of it. And that, I think at that point, I was mostly oblivious to the need for justice at all. Like,
Hmm.
it was not a
Hmm. Yeah.
big piece for me, but I was like, oh my word, this is a big piece for God.
Hmm.
And so there was something that just kind of, um, yeah, just that was, I knew that that would be a big part of my life for the rest of my life from,
Wow. In
yeah.
17, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I love
so,
that.
yeah, the other piece was the unity of the body.
Mm.
And those two have just were kind of planted there at that time. And so, um, I,
Are you talking about the metaphor, like in scripture in the Bible, about different, like, oh, we have an eye and a hand and a foot. We're like different parts of the body. Is that what you're, when you say unity
yes,
of the body? Okay.
yes, yes, yeah, yeah, exactly. And for me, particularly when it comes to different denominations, um, and like the splintering of
Hmm.
the Christian witness and the Christian church, and just kind of, I don't know, building bridges or
Hmm.
conversations along those lines. But
Hmm.
um, the equipping that I had was, I felt that there was not much equipping for me in the church.
Hmm.
And so I was kind of going to these like outside organizations. So the exception was the International Justice Mission in Washington,
Hmm.
D.C. I spent a fall doing an internship with them. Very formative, phenomenal leadership and thought leadership. Um, and then I went to the Carter Center and learned some more there from the President Carter's kind of post-presidency work.
Hmm.
And my idea there was when I was in Guatemala, I told my professor that I wanted to find out what evangelicals were doing in furthering the work of justice. And he laughed and laughed and laughed. He
And
was like,
laughed and laughed. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I was like, well, it can't be that bad. So I went to one of the evangelical churches in my neighborhood, and I was like, tell me what you guys are doing. It was awful. It was like, oh, okay, he was right. Okay, so I wanted to have like this experience through the International Justice Mission of like what's happening in faith spaces, in evangelical spaces. And then from the Carter Center perspective, I wanted to see like when you have that level of relationships and influence, what can be leveraged, what's happening in those types of conversations. And then from there, I went on to my master's in social policy and development in London. And um, I learned so much. My cohort was phenomenal, wonderful professionals in their field that were coming from, I think it was like 40 or 60 different countries and
Wow.
all kinds of different contexts, like our classmate from Vietnam. I remember talking about like, there's a discussion about democracy and promoting democracy or something. And she's like, well, what if your country's not democratic? And oh yeah, what if it isn't? Like, so just getting like all those voices and experiences in a room, that was really
Mm.
formative for me and connecting with other yeah, people from all different kinds of backgrounds and experiences and faith perspectives that were very rich. Um, and so one of my questions for my professors was, what, like, we know what policy should happen, but then we look around and that is not the policy that does happen. So,
Mhm.
how do we reconcile that? Like, what about the policy process? And they were like, yeah, that's what we call the black box. Like, we're academics. We don't know what happens in the policy process. I was like, oh, that's kind of a big piece. So
Wow.
then I went home and worked for almost 10 years in Ohio, um, it kind of closer to the policy process and learning,
Mhm.
okay, the how do hearings work? How do the committees work? How are the parties run? And so then um, along the way with that piece of it, I was kind of learning a lot about advocacy, of course, because we were doing policy advocacy. And so I'm realizing, okay, you need like a singular story to capture people's imagination, but then you need the data to kind of show the bigger picture at the same time. And I kind of realized, oh, there's like a piece here that I'm learning on the job that we don't tell people. And you kind of just have to learn on the job. But you don't have to learn on the job. You could just tell people, here's how you do effective advocacy, and here's the elements that you need to come up with, and just kind of give people a fast track to being effective advocates. And so there was kind of those seeds percolating about like, okay, I could be taking some of this experience and helping people become advocates. And then there was an experience at the church that I was attending where there was spiritual abuse that was just unchecked. No one was dealing with it. And so there was a process for me. I felt that the Lord spoke to me and said, if you decide to get involved with this situation, I will use it to train you.
Mm.
And so I thought, okay, great. We'll go in, we'll get this situation taken care of. That was not what happened. And it was extremely painful. And the Lord was faithful to train me through it. I learned so much about the dynamics of loyalty and what they can play in a community when loyalty is overemphasized at the cost of truth and love. Um, I learned about, my own advocacy efforts and where they fell short. But there was also kind of a crystallizing moment where we were having a meeting with some of the higher ups who could have stepped in and said, this cannot continue to go on. We're shutting down your church or whatever. And they did not. And I realized as we were leaving that meeting, these folks have not been equipped for the work of justice in their space. So they are talking about injustice out there, and we support justice in Cambodia. But like when it happens in your office and someone tells you this is what's happening, and they say, well, sounds like a he said, she said situation, rather than knowing, oh, okay, well, we're not sure what's happening, so we need to investigate. And then when we've finished our investigation, then we can intervene because we're in that position. And here's our levers for intervening, and let's discern which one might be the best. And so through that training and realizing the training that I had gone through personally through this process, and then the realizing what a gap this was in equipping that we can't say we're about justice, but not learn the skills of
Mhm.
doing it. That then prompted me to do all the writing and study that I've done since then to try to put together those resources so that
Mhm.
people can have a roadmap and know what steps to take both in confronting injustice and then repair in the aftermath. Like, okay,
Mm,
dealt with
hmm
the abusive leader. What do we need to do in terms of healing? What do we need to do in terms
hmm
of accountability? What community repentance and reform work do we need to do?
mm.
And so that has all come out of that experience of being equipped and now wanting to be passing those lessons on.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I know there's so much in there that we're just glazing over. Is there, so there, you're pointing to, we have resources that we could share with people that are interested or, yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. On my website, justicedriver.com, there's a Bible study and a sermon series. That's kind of the, I'd love to hear people's thoughts too of other ideas, but sermon series, Bible studies. I just finished one this week that I was
hmm
mentioning, so that's not up on the website yet, but newsletters and writings and articles. And I'm just continuing to plug away to try to develop more.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes. Yeah, there's so much I want to even go in there because I think, it's like, because yeah, like there's the wisdom of like the just training how to do something because you can say like love your neighbor or but like if nobody modeled for you how to like invite people into your home or like to bring gifts to people or how to check in on people or how to say nice things before you say the other thing that you know there's we just tend to repeat so some of it is we're just the automaticity of human nature so just needing and we do that a lot with our parents, for example, right? Oh man, that's not okay. And then, but that's the model we had. So then we just kind of like repeat it, much to our chagrin when we find that out years, decades later. So I think there's so much to mine in that. And there's just in my head, I was like, but then there's also just these fundamental issues when we're talking about like a spiritual worldview of like a lack of integrity, right? A greed, selfishness, pride, all these sort of things that motivate being just afraid, right? Of, fearing like people or circumstances more than caring about a right relationship with God or with other people.
Yeah.
So,
Amen.
amen. I know. So, question number two. What what do you think it means to live your healthiest life, Sarah?
Oh, this brought so many like there, I think of health as well-being,
Mm-hmm.
and well-being is like a million things, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
there's everything from like I'm cooking more vegetables now and
Mm-hmm.
trying to have more variety in my diet, and that feels
Mm-hmm.
like a step towards health and wellness. How we move our bodies to the conversation last night at bedtime with our kids, like
Mm-hmm.
everybody in this room knows that no matter what you do, and even if you like mess up on purpose, you're still a joy and a delight, right?
Mm.
You
Yeah,
know?
you said that to your kids?
Well, you say that all the time to our kids. And so our
All the
kids,
time. I love that. Oh, I want to hear that when I was little. It's great.
uh-huh. So
Yeah.
if you ask my kids, what are
Uh,
you? They'll say a
uh.
joy and a delight. At least if I ask them.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
Which, oh yeah, it's so those early years, they're so formative. A joy
yeah,
and a delight. A joy and a delight. Okay.
delight. And so that
Oh,
feeling for me, well-being is knowing that I'm a joy and a delight
yeah.
and
And
taking
you
joy and
are.
delight in other people. Thank you. You are
Yeah, you
too.
are.
And it's seeing how our wellness is tied up in our
Uh-huh.
neighbor's wellness. And I was
hmm
speaking this morning to a business school class in town. I love doing this. It's so much fun. They're always a great group. And we were talking about how it can be hard in a Western individualistic capitalist context to talk about the Jubilee. Look at these
Yeah,
25.
yeah. I've got a note up somewhere about rest and Sabbath and yeah, year of Jubilee. Tell us more about
Yes.
Jubilee.
Okay, so the Sabbath years and the Jubilee years are these social mechanisms set up by God to provide regular economic resets. So every 7 years,
Mhm.
all the debts are forgiven every 7 years. All of the bonded laborers are released. So if you've said, hey, take me into work on your farm and I'll, whatever, you're done. Um, so then every seventh 7 years is the Jubilee. And that's the big, like, all those things happen. And also, land is returned, agricultural land is returned to their original owners. So if I sold you my land, it's not going to become this generational, like, we have no land and therefore we have no this, and then we have even less and less and less. And you bought my land and then you buy someone else's land and you have more and more and more. There's this resetting
Hmm.
that happens on this regular basis. And so that is so counterintuitive. And some of the students are like, well, doesn't that mess up incentives? Like, well, it really changes incentives,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And but what we see in the data and what we know is that even this like very counterintuitive thing has so many payoffs in terms of life expectancy. Like these wide wealth gaps are again negative for the rich and the poor in
Mhm.
terms of happiness of the rich and poor in the society, life expectancy of the rich and poor in the society. And
So
the
life expectancy goes down the greater the wealth gap is. But it's impacting both, yeah, the
yeah,
entire community. Mm.
yeah, and happiness levels
And
too.
happiness. Mm. Mm.
And so, how is my well being tied into everyone else's well being? Like in my master's, excuse me, in my master's program, we had a question about what's the difference between human development and social development. And the whole year, I never figured out what the difference was. It was many years later that I realized, oh, what they're trying to get at is human development is kind of developing the capacity to take care of yourself, which is important. And social development is kind of developing the capacity for us to take care of each other. And how critical both of those are when it comes to impacting health, wellness, thriving, flourishing.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, to anybody, not everybody, but to the vast majority of people, or just representative of the US culture, it'll be very foreign, right? Because if you say something like socialist, which the core word there is like you're talking about social development, like somebody that would be a socialist would be really community minded, right? Like let's have resources for everybody. Like, oh, it's healthier for the baby to have the mom at home and the dad at home, and they get paid while they're there. And then that actually leads to healthier children, which leads to healthier teens, which leads to a more productive society. So, oh, yes, we'll invest in that. And oh, it's better for society to not have a burden of healthcare expenses and education expenses. So we're going to provide the basics. And yes, you can always like do extra stuff on top of it, if you got that capacity or that desire. But like we're going to care for these fundamental things, and oh, you need to eat, and yeah, yeah. So your business group, yeah, because I had that question. I was like, oh, how is the business group handling like this year of Jubilee? Because you're right. You're saying that individualistic way that we operate in the US for sure, and it's not exclusive to us, but we are clearly a very driving force in the world um, to need to take care of ourselves. And it's interesting when our social development is not that good, our human development is not good. And so I think what I find, again, if I loop back to, my context as somebody that's helped people with physical issues related to movement, in large part pain related to movement or just being and going through their life, that I lost my train of thought just by trying to explain that. I lost my train of thought. Shoot, that
The social
happens.
development being what, like foundational for the human development?
Yes, yeah. So what I'm observing, so I was just trying to give context to where this is saying from, again, like my observation of the world, and that's a big part of my orientation, is that so many people are just really struggling to take care of themselves, the
Mm.
human development side, and doing even fundamental basic things that are going back even to childhood, right? And like, why do I have pain in these areas? Well, there's emotions that, because I didn't have somebody telling me I was a joy and a delight growing up, or when I came home, from school and I didn't have somebody to help navigate through this and why, and there's like this generational kind of passing down on, and that it does, in fact, manifest in how people feel. It manifests in just more and more of my patients, just anxiety. And, so they're anxious. They have disordered breathing. When we're anxious, we breathe up in our chest, which is a stress state. So we're in a physical stress state that changes our circulating hormones and neurotransmitters. It's not our rest, digest, or heal. Like you said, you referenced that with our flight, fight, freeze. It's like this high cortisol levels, these very like surges of these chemicals that our body creates that help us survive, but they're more for emergencies, but people are operating in that all the time. So I bring that to say, like, and then it can almost lead to like this grasping of like, and needing to figure out, okay, I need to take care of myself because I can't really take care of other people at this point because I'm so maxed out, my body is shutting down, and it's related to things like immune disease and cancer, like stress, like there's evidence showing these kind of things. So I love that. I haven't heard of that, the human development versus social development.
So, how
Um,
do you advise your patients when they're in that situation? What steps can they take? Because that's a hard place to be and hard place to get out of, I think,
yeah.
people who are in that.
So one of the biggest, let me see if I can summarize it. We'll see what comes out. I think one of the biggest shifts in how I manage my patients, so how I advise them and how I interact with them, it's really a slowing down.
Hmm.
It's a paying attention, and there's a lot of resistance to it. Um, it's been a rough year in Los Angeles. Oh, no. It's been a rough year in Los Angeles, and I have a number of patients very significantly. We're all impacted by the fires here. But some people, it's a communal trauma, and but some people it's very their day-to-day life. They lost their home or they haven't been able to be in their home because um there's just it was spared, but it was in this plume of all this toxic debris and airborne things that, houses needing to be. I was just talking to a patient yesterday of all the things that need to happen, and she had a very severe episode of pain that began about a month after uh, the fire, and her body is just super high uh, that um, that sympathetic response, that stress response. And our bodies are vulnerable there to underlying things. Like think of, you can think of like when you have the flu, like when your body is trying to protect you and heal something, it there's a pain associated with that. And so
Okay.
when we have these stress hormones in our body, when we're trying to like fight something, there's like a susceptibility to that. Like our pain perception is altered because pain is an output of our brain. It's not actually something that happens anywhere in our body. It's our brain, which is pain is very interesting and we don't have the same experience of it. Our moods impacted, our all kinds of things impacted. So, but coming back to rest, but this individual and a lot of people that I work with, these are very driven people, um, work long days, work, like high performing, and you can point to things and you can say, well, actually, like one of the fundamental issues here is stress
Mm.
and like the behavior of day to day, because we can think like have a belief like my body let me down. My body's failed me. I used to be able to do this and now suddenly I can't. And embedded in that, so I'm using that in the negative, embedded in that is the that my body should continue to operate like as if what was doing before was okay. Instead of, no, this is the product of your body's telling a story of what happened. So our body is always telling a story. You can tell somebody that does sit-ups every 100 sit-ups every day and somebody that's never done a sit-up just by looking at their body, right?
Uh-huh.
Our body tells a story. And our body also just it also tells like emotional stress. You can tell somebody that smiled a lot. You can tell somebody that's scowled a lot or frowned a lot or like so how does it change? There's a lot of slowing down is the biggest thing because that allows us to know what our body is saying. It allows us to process the emotions that need to happen. It allows us to actually observe our behaviors and see why it puts a pause on the automatic nature of things. And sometimes the automatic things that we do are good, but almost anything that's completely automatic is not good, right? We need to have discernment in that. So even if it's something we think is healthy, like, oh, I run every day, like, oh, well, doesn't your life change a little bit? So maybe you need to have some adaptability
Uh,
to like running every day. So of course we could talk and talk on that for a long time. But a big part of it, I think, is rest, just so people can actually observe and notice how they're breathing. And then there's very physical manifestations. When you're breathing up in your chest, you're not doing it efficiently. Things get tight in your ribs. That has implications for your shoulder. That has implications for your neck. It has implications for your low back because you're not moving in the same way. There's a rigidity, and then that forces alterations. And then anything that's rigid, anything that's more dynamic around it is going to have to move and flex more to make up for it. So there's a big emphasis on how integrated we are. So there's less and less, and I think this is true of just wisdom. We talked about wisdom before and discernment, that there's there's always a tension in wisdom. Wisdom is never just easy, like black and white, but you can get very basic truths. You can say wise things pretty short, but then you almost have to explain it because if it was taken out of context, it could be interpreted very differently.
yeah.
And so I think that's true in our body that there's just a need for a wisdom within our body, and that takes like slowing down and pausing. It takes breathing. I mean, breathing is a spiritual practice. Like even like I've heard like even all the Abrahamic religions, the name of God is breath. Like when you say
Huh.
it is breath, whether it's, Yahweh, like it's a breath or Allah or that these, so anyway, I could go on and on, but that's
Yeah, I love that.
a long answer to
No, that there's so much there in terms of how do we, because my experience being in those states is that I'm so agitated, it's hard for
that.
me to like to do the breathing and the slowing
Correct.
down because I'm
Correct.
so like crazed.
Correct. Correct.
And so to have someone coming alongside and like, okay, let's just sit or, I don't know
Hmm.
but it's what a gift to be able to come alongside people who are in that state.
Yeah, I mean, we all life is hard. So it's not so I think I don't think in integrated living, like I don't think you should operate is there's a breaking down of the barriers that you put in compartmentalization that you put uh between like how you handle one part of your life and other parts of your life. So um I think relationships tend to go better if you're willing to slow down and
Yeah.
see how the person's doing, notice how you're doing, how you're interacting, and um, decide a little bit about, okay, what's a good way, to handle the same thing with finances or making decisions about, am I going to buy this or not buy this? Do we move here? Do we not? What career should I do? That there is like what should I eat, right? Instead of just like what's easy and what do I do all the time? But oh, what is my end goal? So I think you can apply things that you've talked about with like investigating, right? So just instead of, well,
Yeah.
this is how it's always done, but can there be this curiosity about like the beliefs that I have about my body and how it moves? And if I can have different beliefs, then I can actually do something different about it. But so it's identifying like goals, like future goals, and then seeing like, is there room within my behavior to change something? But to me, which is part of my interest in, because I want to help people get healthy, that to not just stay in the physical domain, because that's a false dichotomy. So if we're going to try to
Mm.
be healthy, it needs to be, so for my patients, it's not just what exercises they're doing. It is like how long are their work days, and it is like how are they eating and what are their relationships like, and what's their worldview about, is the world burning down? Like, what's the trajectory of the world? Like, how are we headed? Like, are we moving towards like a better world? Or are we, like obviously I think we all agree that there's issues, but I think it's all the same, and there might be the details might be a little different, because we might talk about the supraspinatus in your shoulder and the need to do a specific exercise, but there's still a like you can do just the exercise or you can have an awareness. So there's much more people need to slow down to actually know what their posture is and how they're moving versus okay, I did the exercises, check, like and moving on. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something that I'm trying to practice more in parenting, this
Hmm.
coming down to problem solve together. And that is such a, I just don't think of it usually. It's like,
Mm. Hmm.
okay. And so I was listening to the book, How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen and Listen How Your Kids So Your Kids Will Talk or whatever. That's not exactly right, but
Yeah, you
and
can
they,
send it to me and we could put it in.
okay.
Yeah, once you figure out what
Okay.
that is. Yeah.
Um, and they talked about, when you're with your kids and you're trying to, there's a conflict or a resistance or a whatever is happening. If you are able to in the moment, you can take the time, or you can do it later. Hey, I noticed this thing happened. And in that moment, we really needed to get out the door and get you to school. But you really felt like you needed to keep doing the thing that you were doing.
Mm.
Can we brainstorm ideas together about how we could maybe like have this situation be workable so that it's not like a point of frustration for both of us?
Hmm.
And then the process of just like open brainstorming, like, yes, you could just keep playing your thing all day. That's one option. The
Hmm.
other option is like, whatever, you just brainstorm,
Hmm.
brainstorm.
Right. Yeah.
And then guiding, very often the child will themselves say, well, I do have to go to school. But how about if we, but, and this is a wonderful thing. There's so much about this book that I feel like applies to all human relationships. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
I just love collaborative problem solving in any
Mm-hmm.
context,
Mm-hmm.
but it takes time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yes, exactly. And there's a resistance to that, right?
yes, yes. And when I'm in the moment of like, get your shoes on, like it's not, I'm not in
Mm-hmm.
that moment of like, what's going on? Let's talk about
Yeah,
it. So you
I
can't
know.
always, you know,
Of course, of course.
but there is a piece of like, even how do we design our lives? Like, how full are
Correct.
they? How much space
Correct.
do we
Correct.
have
Yeah.
for things that come up or talking things out or even saying hello to people? Like, I love
Mm-hmm.
how the studies that have come out about our weak links in our day-to-day life and how important they are for our well-being. Like,
Okay, tell us more. Weak
okay, the
links.
barista saying hi, or the connection you always say hi to the person who walks by your house, or you always wave to this person while you're both walking, or like people that are, they're not deep relationships at all. You might not even know their name, but the significant impact on your well-being of just those little daily touch points with people. And I find that really true for myself. You know, your bus driver, um, just a really warm hello from your bus driver to your bus driver, you know, just that exchange basically,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
how this was a few years ago, but just talking about how significant an impact it has. And those are just things of taking time. Sometimes they don't even take more time. It's just the awareness, like you talked
Mm-hmm.
about.
Mm-hmm. That is so true in my experience and very fluctuating in my awareness of it. I think I noticed it, but I could only notice it in slowing down enough to notice that there was somebody next to me and not just be like in my head about, so one of the things that occurred earlier was productivity. And I think that's a US kind of thing, a capitalist kind of thing, is where our worth is really tied into being productive. And so the idea of slowing down really can really just feel like it's going to unravel like our clothes, and it's going to be like emperor has no clothes kind of situation if we slow down, because everything everything hinges on like the go go go. So if I slow down, but in slowing down, then it was really like my brain went of when I looked somebody in the eye, and it could be just, yeah, very simple. It might not even be anything else other than I'm going to look you in the eye as we're passing, and I'm not going to avert my eyes. There's kind of an aversion that happens a lot of time, like something strange about not wanting to be seen, or that's how we're habituated. But it's interesting when I would break that patterning, it really opened up this realm to me that people want to be seen.
Hmm.
And so then if it was a smile, if it was anything else, and a couple weeks ago, I can't remember if I talked to you about it, but I did a compliment day. And yeah, and that was just like whole next level, because I went with the intention of, oh, all these, and I like that word weak link. I didn't know that phraseology. Anytime I have this weak link encounter, my it's I'm intentionally going to go in, and and I would just say like, Sarah, that floral shirt is like awesome. I can't quite tell the patterns, but it's so fun and it just reminds me of your personality. But I might not know their personality, but I could just say something like that, or like, those earrings are really cool, and then it could just be like walking on to, and you just leave that person in this kind of glow. But the
Oh, yeah.
amazing thing was what a gift it was to me.
Mhm.
Um, and I haven't been able to repeat quite that intensity, but it was such a wonderful experience, and has been really transformative. So I know intuitively, I know experientially that to be true, and I'm excited to know that there's data supporting that, which is again just this, we're all connected, like this energy, this connection, like what we offer to the world changes things. Versus there's times now, and it's not just now, but there's a propensity for me now just to be like, oh, the world's falling apart, and to be like, everybody, like everybody out there. And then I go out there and then I'm just like, even just look at somebody like, a little bit, or like it's a different, right? I'm not like, oh, hi, prehuman. I'm like, you're one of them, aren't you? Like, do I have to
Yes,
be on guard?
yes.
And then they do, it's like amazing. Even in a car, you can just give them like a little bit of a, I didn't like how you changed lanes, and they're happy to dish it back of like this energy
Yes.
exchange. So I'm sure there's maybe research about the flip side of that. I do want to say, just on the record, what a fantastic parent you are. And I'm so glad to be witnessing that. Um, as we wrap up today, is there anything else you want to say about what you're currently learning about living your healthiest life, or what you wish people knew more about living their healthiest life?
I I just am always learning from other people too. I feel like there's so much equipping that I am hungry for, that I
Mm,
look to other people for. And so I love the feeling of like, okay, I can equip you in this and you can equip me in that. And then we're all like operating from each other's strengths and learning from each other's strengths rather than operating out of feelings of inferiority or superiority or jealousy
mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm,
disdain, or but that like I don't know, I just think there's so much richness in our conversation and there's so much that
mm,
I learn from um how other people are living their healthiest lives.
mm,
And I am just really grateful for your intentionality
mm,
around equipping people in this area because it's such a huge piece of well-being. So thank you.
Thank you. I just really appreciate you being willing to be here today. I think a big part of what I've received from you today is this. It's very clear, this justice orientation that you have, that you've committed your life to since age 17. and and I think that a lot of times when people think about healthy living, they are operating more in that human development side. Um, and I think we really need and that's important. And I think what you offer here is a really um, an opportunity to expand our view of just how the social development component of like, how do we care for one another, and how do I operate in that space. And that has been really beneficial for me today. And I know that I'll be interested to come back and listen to this chat again and learn even more. So thank you so much. I love you so much. I
I
feel
love
honored that lucked out that you're my cousin. And I look forward to talking to you offline, but thanks for being here today.
this was so much fun to just be able to like be exchanging in this way and back and forth and covering a lot of ground. I feel like this is
We
really, really fun. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. To all the listeners, may you always see the blessing. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of the LYHL Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. If you liked what you heard, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at the Elle, as well as on my website, www.theelbetrell.com. Of course, you can find me back here at the next episode of the LYHL Podcast. There's numerous ways to support my work so I can keep helping you live your healthiest life. You can do this financially via links on my website or the show notes, by subscribing to the podcast and YouTube channels, by joining my newsletter community, aptly named the LYHL Newsletter, by rating the podcast, by sharing with others, those you meet, and participating in coaching sessions. It's my passion to help you live your healthiest life. I'm so glad you're here. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you're learning and the insights you're gaining from these conversations. May you always see the blessing.